for Action Wednesday. We are here today to talk about plastics, climate, and rethinking disposable. So thanks again for coming out tonight and hearing what we have to say about the work that Clean Water Action is doing on plastics. My name is Deanna White. I am the state director for Minnesota, and we're just going to do a quick run through a slideshow and share a little bit about what the problem is with plastics, why it's a concern to us from both the water, from not just both, all of a water, climate, and public health perspective. So I'm going to share my screen, or attempt to. There we go. So what is the problem with plastics? How is plastic waste a climate issue? And what are we doing about it? And a little bit about what you can do about it too. So there's an alarming trend. This chart shows worldwide plastic production increases. And this actually just is from 2013. But what we're seeing is that global production of plastics has increased dramatically in the last 50 years. And we show it doubling by 2035 and quadrupling by 2050. And we're going to talk about what the impacts of that are and why that's a problem.
Hey, Deanna, it looks like we're having a slight technical difficulty.
Okay.
I'm seeing all of your slides, not one by one at the moment.
That's interesting because I am seeing them one by one. So let's try this again. How about that?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. So we know that the Great Lakes amount to 95% of all the fresh water that exists in the United States, and they're the primary drinking water source for 40 million people, easily making these waters our most precious natural resource. But yet throughout the Great Lakes region, we're seeing increased contamination from a number of sources. The list of things that threaten the quality and quantity of the Great Lakes is long, but one of the most subtle threats are single-use plastics. Global production of plastics has increased dramatically, as we saw on the last slide. The Rochester Institute of Technology estimates that 22 million pounds of plastics enter the Great Lakes annually, most coming from single-use containers, plastic bags, and microfibers. So we're talking about the Great Lakes because that's obviously a huge concern for folks in our region. But if you think about, it's not just the Great Lakes, that's just where we have these numbers for, we can see that it's a huge problem. So there's a lot of different ways that plastics, especially single-use plastics, are a threat to our water and public health. The first one we'll talk about is microplastics. There's an increasing level of microplastics in our water, and that creates a huge public health concern. They're being found more frequently in wildlife, including the fish we eat, as well as in the water, water systems. And the water systems that we have generally have a really hard time filtering out microplastics. So the plastics and the chemicals that are used to make them end up making their way into the human body through our water and through food. Secondly, we'll talk about, if I can get it to go to the next slide. There we go. We'll talk about the waste stream. And this is one that people are most familiar with. We know that single-use plastics in particular create a big problem for the waste stream. It's estimated that there, at best, 20% of plastic products are collected for recycling, and of those, only 5% actually replace virgin plastic. Just as a comparison, for steel, aluminum, and paper, it's 60 to 80%. So it's a big problem, and that creates a significant amount of plastic waste. It ends up in landfills or potentially incinerators or as litter. So the fact is we're just continuing to manufacture these products in large quantities. They're not getting recycled. They're not getting put into the circular economy. They just become waste that we have to figure out what to do with. And then there's the problem of chemical pollution. Plastics are made up of chemicals for the most part, and they break down in the environment, and they can break down into chemicals like PFAS, which we've talked a lot about at Clean Water Action. These chemicals are a direct threat to our health, and they require really expensive and energy-intensive treatment to get them out of our water, if we can get them out of our water. So the fact that the plastics that are out in the environment break down in not just into microplastics, but also the chemicals leach out and get into our environment and into our bodies. So we know that plastic is a problem. So why is it a climate change problem? Well, again, plastics are made from chemicals, and chemicals tend to be made from oil. So we know that plastic pollution, plastic production is estimated to use 8 to 10% of the world's oil. As we've done a great job in our climate change work, reducing demand in other areas, oil companies are really pushing plastics as an area for growth. So some estimates are that plastics could represent as much as 95% of the net growth in demand for oil in the coming decades. Think about that, 95%. Oil companies are not only doubling down, they're quadrupling down on the growth of plastics as an outlet for their oil products. This would double the projected annual emissions associated with plastics by 2050. So that's a huge problem. That is a huge climate problem. So what are we doing about it? Well, first off, we can make changes in our personal behavior to reduce market demand. And we do that through a campaign we call ReThink Disposable, where we help individuals and businesses rethink the disposables that they use in their everyday life and workplace, and try and create alternatives and create demand for better alternatives. Another way that we work on it is to look at procurement policies. Government procurement of products really can be a market driver across a lot of sectors. And so the more we can reduce demand or create demand for reusable items as opposed to disposable plastic items through our procurement processes, that also creates a change in the market. And then we're working on policies that make reductions in plastics permanent. So it's not just something that someone makes a personal choice, and that's great. And that can be really powerful. And maybe the market shifts for a little while. We want to make sure that those shifts become permanent. And so we always like to talk about what can you as an individual do about it. First off, make at least one change to reduce your use of plastic, particularly a single-use plastic. And you can visit our ReThink Disposable website for tips on that. But it can be something as simple as, carrying your water bottle with you, or choosing to use glass, food containers instead of, plastic. So just thinking about one way, at least one way that you can make a change to reduce your use of plastic. Talk to your friends, families, and coworkers about it. Look around your home, look around your office. Are there changes that can be made that would reduce the use of plastics, and particularly single-use plastics? And then keep in touch with us. Keep an eye out for our communications about opportunities to engage in supporting plastic reduction policies and practices. And there'll be more of that as we move forward. We are coordinating with other groups and creating plans for future work around plastic reduction policies. So if you want more information, you can visit our website, or you're welcome to email me at cleanwater.org. So I'm going to stop sharing. I know that was really quick, but I want to just see if there's any questions that anyone has. All right, well, I think I set a record, but hopefully you learned a little bit more about why plastics are a concern, not just as a waste issue, not just as a water and health issue, but also as an issue for the climate. So thanks so much for being with us tonight, and we hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us through our Facebook page, Twitter, or you can email me directly at dwight@cleanwater.org. Thanks so much for being with us.